more interesting developments in the story between Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio, as well as what's going on with the Judgment Day, and leading to the I Quit match, seeing AJ Styles versus Cody Rhodes for the undisputed WWE Championship this upcoming weekend at Clash at the Castle. All this and more on this episode of the J Area Podcast. Man, I gotta tell you, the advancement in storytelling that we've seen over the course of these past few years, especially under the Triple H regime, being that a lot of times in pro wrestling in the past, that is, we weren't rewarded for long-term viewing. You would watch a show and have events occur on any episode of Monday Night Raw or Friday Night SmackDown, and immediately the week after, it was almost as if it was brushed under the rug. It was moved on. It was treated as if the audience had short-term memory, and it's been well documented that Vince McMahon, under his regime, didn't think that a lot of the fans or audience members would keep up or remember a lot of the content on the WWE. So he would treat it short term. There was babyface and heel turns, betrayals, matches that we've seen over and over again as if treated as if children, that we didn't keep up with the product. And now that we have Triple H helming the show, Shawn Michaels running NXT, a little bit of a throwback for DX running the show essentially, the audience has been treated to a show that's really more concentrated on long-term story. It's also a way to connect interweaving storylines into one another. One example, of course, being Alpha Academy. The Alpha Academy, with Otis, Chad Gable, Maxine Dupree, Akira Tozawa, and their involvement with Sami Zayn in recent weeks, has really demonstrated why it's important to acknowledge and recognize the past events and experiences that some of these superstars have endured. Look no further than Otis. Otis, on this past week's Monday Night Raw, talked to Sami Zayn. Sami Zayn pleading with him, you don't have to deal with this. You don't have to suffer with Chad Gable. I know, I've been there. Obviously referring to his time in the Bloodline and Roman Reigns. And then Otis goes on this little monologue talking about how these last 4 years haven't been the easiest for him. He's lost a lot. He mentioned losing his tag team partner, Tucker. He mentioned Mandy Rose, the Money in the Bank briefcase that he lost to The Miz. Stuff like that matters. And it should matter, because in everyday life that you and I are going through, some events that occurred years ago, those still have a level of influence, a level of importance on the actions and the feelings that we have to this day. So it's very nice. It's awesome to see them incorporate that into today's storylines. Having that chance to take a step back and realize, oh yeah, that did happen back then. And yeah, if that happened to me, yeah, it would have some level of affection, some level of impact on me to this day. You resonate with these characters, you tell compelling stories, and it allows your audience members to become more invested in what you're listening to or what you're watching. And that's why I think the Alpha Academy story has been so compelling, because you're involving all these characters who have had different experiences and now dealing with emotional weight, the mistreatment, the misguidance that they're having under a Chad Gable, and seeing a babyface like Sami Zayn, who we've seen struggle in the WWE in terms of the mid-card, trying to raise up to relevancy, joining the Bloodline, dealing with that very same emotional and verbal abuse. Now having the opportunity to say, hey, I've been through it. I don't want to see anybody else go through it as well. You become invested in these stories. You become invested in these people. Look no further than what's going on with the Judgment Day. That is easily the premier storyline on Monday Night Raw, arguably in the WWE, because of the long-term story that they've been telling. You look back, wind the clock back to the spring of 2022. Edge was feuding with AJ Styles. Edge had issued an open challenge for WrestleMania 38. He was looking for an opponent that would test his limits, someone that would challenge him, being that he was a grizzled veteran, looking for some fight. AJ Styles answers the call, and they're going to have their battle at WrestleMania 38 in Dallas, Texas. And along the lines, a babyface Edge would turn heel for the first time since 2010. And you would see these tendencies. He became a little darker, a little bit more menacing. And at WrestleMania, he would defeat AJ Styles with the help of Damian Priest. And that in itself served as the inception, the creation of the Judgment Day. They would have their feud elevate to WrestleMania Backlash, where AJ Styles again would suffer a loss to Edge due to interference from a mysterious hooded figure that revealed himself to be Rhea Ripley. We now had 3 members of the Judgment Day. Over the course of the next few months, we would see the likes of Finn Balor team with AJ Styles, along with the likes of Liv Morgan. Now the 3 of them would fight against the Judgment Day's Edge, Damian Priest, and Rhea Ripley. But it was the night after their Hell in a Cell mixed tag match, their mixed tag match at the Hell in a Cell event, that we saw the addition of Finn Balor. And with that came the shocking revelation that they would kick out their leader, that they would kick out Edge. Now the Judgment Day was in its pretty much the form that we all knew and grew to know. Finn Balor, Damian Priest, Rhea Ripley. Interesting enough, a sidebar here, I'm very much into the behind the scenes of what goes on with the storylines. At the Hell in a Cell event the night before, Cody Rhodes obviously wrestled with a torn pectoral tendon, and he would miss time. He wouldn't be back until the Royal Rumble, so they were short on baby faces, which would explain why they had to kick Edge out of the group, forcing him to become a baby face. A little inside knowledge for those who didn't know. But we move back to the Judgment Day storyline, and now the story becomes, what are we going to do with these 3 individuals? What's the story now? Why are they doing what they're doing? And Rhea Ripley still feuding with Liv Morgan because they had their own pass. You see, they were a tag team. At WrestleMania 38, they were a tag team for the tag titles. They weren't successful. And over time, Liv Morgan fighting Rhea Ripley, establishing this content, this dissension between the two. And in the meantime, who was one of Edge's good friends, Rey Mysterio. Rey Mysterio and his newly active son, Dominic Mysterio, would be in tag team matches against the likes of Damian Priest and Finn Balor. This would lead to Rhea Ripley gaining a little bit of interest in Dominic Mysterio, wanting to maybe lure him to the dark side. Now, there were times I remember where she would have him in a submission hold, locking her legs around his neck and choking him out. And you wondered, what are they doing with this story? Is Dominic going to join the Judgment Day? Or how are they going to move forward with this? And it would all culminate at Clash at the Castle in 2022, where Rey Mysterio chose Edge as his tag team partner. And obviously, if you remember, this was the event that Dominic Mysterio finally showed his true colors and turned not only on Edge, but on his own father, Rey Mysterio. He said that you chose him over me. You chose him over your own family. And this was the beginning of, I think, one of the better modern storylines in WWE. Not only has it managed to remain relevant for the last couple of years, but it's demonstrated the improvement and the growth that Dominic has had, not only in ring, but as a character. He's one of the most over heels. He probably is the most over heel acts, not only in WWE, but in pro wrestling. Every time he enters an arena, he is showered with boos. He is heckled. He won't even be allowed the opportunity to speak most of the time. And it's just amazing, because when was the last time you saw that on a consistent basis? It's not like it's one guy in a city that hates him, or in one of those smart crowds who recognizes how to react to certain wrestlers. No, it's in every city. He is struggling to get a word out because the boos, such animosity towards Dominic Mysterio. And to see that level of growth, we would see him join the Judgment Day. He would start wearing, a lot more purple, a lot more black, had his hair slicked, a new attitude, a new attire. And over time, he became more closer with Rhea Ripley, the same woman who lured him into the Judgment Day. And we would see that continue on as he had his feud with Rey Mysterio. Ultimately, he would lose at WrestleMania 39. But then over time, we saw the bond of the Judgment Day come into question. There were times where there was a little bit of a dissension within the ranks of the Judgment Day. There were times where we weren't sure who was the leader. Rhea, Finn, Damian, especially throughout last summer when you had Rhea as the world champion. Finn was the number one contender for the world title, challenging Seth Rollins at Money in the Bank and SummerSlam. And Damian Priest, who was the most recent winner of the Money in the Bank ladder match. All to say, were we getting ready for the breakup? But that wasn't the case. Although Finn Balor was unable to capture the world title, he and Damian Priest, at this point calling himself Senor Money in the Bank, would win the tag team championships, defeating Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn. Now, we're leading into this new era where they're all champions because Dominic Mysterio recently would capture the North American Championship in NXT. Like I said, Rhea is still the world champion, and the tag team champions, Finn Balor, Damian Priest. We would see the likes of R-Truth and JD McDonough join the Judgment Day. Real recently, Carlito trying to join the Judgment Day. But the story takes an interesting turn at WrestleMania 40. At WrestleMania 40, Becky Lynch unsuccessfully challenges for the Women's World Championship. She would lose to Rhea Ripley, and Rhea Ripley would successfully hold the title for over a year. But it was that night after that she was attacked by a returning Liv Morgan. Liv Morgan, who we last mentioned in this story, was feuding with Rhea Ripley in the summer of 2023, but due to a shoulder injury, that would see her out of action until January, where she would return as the number 30 entrant in the Women's Royal Rumble. Since then, she kind of kept her distance from Rhea Ripley, but obviously kept alluding to this revenge tour. She wanted to come back and claim what was hers, a match with Rhea Ripley and the Women's World Championship. This would culminate at WrestleMania 40, as I mentioned, where Rhea Ripley would retain the title against Becky. The night after, she would be attacked by Liv Morgan, suffering a real-life injury that has still seen her sidelined. We don't know when she's coming back. And since then, Liv Morgan had her eyes locked on that Women's World Championship, and a battle royal was set in which Becky Lynch would emerge victorious, gaining the championship. Liv Morgan, again, obsessed with this revenge tour. She would not be satisfied with nothing less than the world title. And as we saw at King and Queen of the Ring, she would do so by capturing the Women's World title, defeating Becky Lynch, albeit with a little help, unintentional or not, by Dominic Mysterio. And that concludes that chapter, the revenge tour. One could say it was completed, but not for Liv Morgan. You see, because in recent weeks, she's been demonstrating these level of interest in Dominic Mysterio. One week she would claim that I got Rhea Ripley injured. She's gone. I have her world title. But I said I would take everything from her, and that included Dominic Mysterio. These advances that she's been making towards Dominic, very compelling, because now you don't know who to trust. Is Dominic Mysterio sincere when he claims to not want to entertain these advancements by a Liv Morgan? Is Liv Morgan actually interested in Dominic, or is this just a ploy to rile up Rhea Ripley, or perhaps destroy the Judgment Day? I think it would be the latter. I think it's Liv Morgan trying to play mind games. She's not interested in Dominic at all. She's interested in destroying the group that essentially cost her 6 months of her own career. And I don't think she'll be satisfied until she sees it through. But when you have segments like the one that we saw this past week on Monday Night Raw, where she's offering her hotel key card to Dominic Mysterio, obviously making serious advancements towards him. We saw the bump that occurred during the tag team match when she fell on top of Dominic Mysterio. And I just keep wondering, how is Rhea Ripley going to react? Obviously, in past years, we would say, oh, does she even know? But it's been established that a lot of the members of the roster watch back Raw. They watch back the footage. And if I'm Rhea Ripley, why wouldn't I check out Monday Night Raw to see how members of the Judgment Day are doing? You're going to keep contact with your boys, right? You're going to make sure everything's okay. So she has to know. She has to have some semblance of acknowledgement revolving around the whole Liv Morgan situation. But is she contacting Dominic? Is she talking to Dominic as much? Dominic claimed to have given Mommy her space. But again, unreliable narrators. We don't know if that's the case. We don't know what Rhea Ripley's stance is until she returns. One interesting note that I thought, it shouldn't have gone unnoticed, but they didn't really, refer to it later in the episode of Raw. And that was right before they head out. There is a moment when all members of the Judgment Day collectively, put up their fists for a collective, fist bump. And you see Finn Balor reach out and grab the key card from the table while no one was noticing. We're going to assume that no one noticed. But you see him reach out and he grabs the card, puts it in his pocket, his jacket pocket, to be precise. Why? And that's the question that we need to be asking. Why? Obviously, it was meant for Dominic. Was Finn Balor taking out of the way as a means to prevent Dominic from doing something stupid? Was it Finn Balor perhaps taking up on that offer? Is there some kind of cahoots between Finn Balor and Liv Morgan? There was an episode of Raw where we saw them sharing the same car. Much like how Liv Morgan and Dominic Mysterio were in the same room at one point. Is there something being planned here, right? I don't know about the Dominic Mysterio. I'm on the assumption that Liv Morgan is just trying to break up the Judgment Day, because I think that's just a natural progression in the story. But when in regards to Finn Balor, I'm thinking back to 2022. Liv Morgan and Finn Balor were on the same team for a couple months, battling Damian, battling Rhea Ripley. Are we going to be seeing the Judgment Day split in two? Much like what's going on with the Bloodline? I don't think they would do that, because why would you have the same story being told on both shows? Something to keep an eye out. Very interesting developments with the Judgment Day and Liv Morgan storyline. We look forward to next week on Monday Night Raw, seeing where they go with it. But who knows, maybe at Clash at the Castle, we see something happen. Obviously, Damian Priest will be defending his World Heavyweight Championship against Drew McIntyre in what I think probably will be the main event of the show, being that it's in Scotland, Drew McIntyre's hometown, home country. Maybe we see something there. I doubt it, obviously, because Drew McIntyre won the match against Finn Balor, preventing any members of the Judgment Day to be ringside, but they're heels. They could break the rules, right? I don't think anything's going to come out of it, but maybe in a backstage segment prior to the match, leading up to the match. Obviously, social media is in play, because you see instances like Liv Morgan liking like every picture of Dominic Mysterio's on Instagram, and Damian Priest, posting a story referring to it, saying it's like a red flag. Anything's in play, and everything counts. Every little detail needs to be noticed, because you never know when it's going to come into play. That's why I've been saying how the level of long-term booking and long-term storytelling really, I think, has improved the overall product, because you see every segment has meaning, has purpose, whereas in years past, it didn't. You could see just a filler match or a quick comedy segment. But now it's like every segment has weight in that particular superstar's story. And who knows, maybe it'll intertwine with other stories as well. And that's what I think is so great about pro wrestling. It's a little bit of everything for everyone. You can always find someone or find a story that you connect with, that you resonate with, and you latch onto it, and that's how it begins, right? And that's not only the case for storylines, but look at matches. We're going to have a main event matchup between Damian Priest defending it against Drew McIntyre, as I mentioned. But on the SmackDown side, we have an I Quit match. AJ Styles challenges Cody Rhodes again for the WWE title at Clash at the Castle in what I think could possibly be the opener of the show, or probably, like the third match. I don't think it's going to close out. Um, it kind of sucks for Cody, not going to main event a show, and that brings me back to like the CM Punk years where he was champion for 434 days and did a main event every show. But I think being that it's in Scotland, this is an obvious choice to have Drew McIntyre main event. The only issue I see is whether they have him win or not. And obviously, join me on Friday, where I will be providing my predictions for the Clash at the Castle event. I'll be out my predictions and seeing who wins where and what match does it place on the card. But being that it's an I Quit match, a very interesting choice there. Because as I mentioned, everything has a purpose. Everything has a reason. Why are we having this match? Well, AJ Styles attacked Cody Rhodes. Cody Rhodes obviously wants retribution. He wants revenge against an AJ Styles. But why specifically an I Quit match? Well, because AJ Styles hinted at retirement. He duped us all. Well, not everybody, but he tricked Cody Rhodes into thinking that he was going to retire. So now Cody Rhodes, as retaliation, will force AJ Styles to say the two words that he should have said that episode of SmackDown: I quit. And seeing this side of Cody Rhodes is a warm welcome. I'm all for the well-mannered, demeanored baby face that Cody Rhodes is, because it demonstrates that he's of an elite level, if you will, pun intended. But to see this aggressive side of Cody, it's very important, because not everything is always sunshine and rainbows. Obviously, Cody's a real person. He wears his heart on his sleeve. As you can tell, many of his promos, he comes a little emotional. So naturally, that you're being deceived and lied to in that fashion, I would feel a type of way too. So to see that level of anger and frustration come out of Cody Rhodes is very vital to the success of this story. I think the winner of the matchup, it's not really a question. I think we all know who will win this match. I think what we should be looking forward to, though, is what comes out of it. I won't spoil my prediction of who wins, obviously, now, but I think we all kind of have an idea of who's going over. But coming out of this match, where does it leave them? Because I'll play devil's advocate, right? If Cody Rhodes loses this matchup, you were going to have him say, I quit? I don't see that happening. He obviously gets a championship rematch. I know the whole rule about championship rematch clauses is kind of iffy, but for this case, I could definitely see it become a trilogy of matches. Versus AJ Styles. If he were to say, I quit, where does he go? Having just finished a feud with LA Knight, having lost to Randy Orton in the opening round of the King of the Ring tournament, and then suffering a second loss to Cody Rhodes after losing to him at Backlash and presumably Clash at the Castle. Where do you go with that? He's technically a heel, but where does he go with that? I've been clamoring, I've been mentioning it on other episodes of the podcast or other videos on the YouTube channel, that will we potentially see a cameo by AJ Styles on TNA? I think it makes sense, being that they're doing the 20th anniversary of Impact just recently occurred. Slammiversary is coming up pretty soon. And why would you miss out on the opportunity to have the face of TNA? I think that's a wide opinion amongst wrestling fans that can be agreed upon. AJ Styles being the face of TNA, he helped rise that X division. He helped elevate the brand and the name of TNA wrestling, ultimately until he left in 2014. But it's just, when you think of certain promotions, there's always a certain wrestler that you think of first. And when I think TNA wrestling, I think AJ Styles. But of course, I don't want to get ahead of myself and assume that that's the case, because we don't know. We haven't gotten to Clash at the Castle. Who knows? It's an I Quit match. Anything goes. So we know, it's fairly certain that AJ Styles will have, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson involved. I find it very hard to believe, unless it's some kind of pride thing where he tells them, I want to do this on my own. I don't need you guys for this. Appreciate you guys. Love you guys. Stay in the back. Unless it's one of those deals, but I don't think so. I think this AJ is hungry. He made it clear to Nick Aldis, I don't have much time left. Obviously acknowledging that AJ's getting up there in age. That's not to say he's old, but let's be real. Like, AJ's been doing this for quite some time. So naturally, when you become desperate, you're going to pull out all the stops as a means to win the match. Which honestly brings me to my next point. What if it leads to a matchup between Nick Aldis and AJ Styles? Nick Aldis is still in wrestling shape, still relatively young, and these two have history as well, obviously. TNA. Back when he was Magnus. They could have a match. I don't see why not. Will it lead to that? We'll have to wait and see. But I think they've already started planting the seeds for a potential match between Aldis and Styles. And that'll be a good way of determining the next year of storytelling, because if Nick Aldis wins, then you establish him as a strong babyface authority figure with a level of respect and credence by defeating one of their top stars, AJ Styles. But if AJ Styles were to defeat Nick Aldis, that elevates AJ Styles back on a good level, good playing field. But what does that do for Nick Aldis? Like, you're supposed to be the boss, but you lost to AJ Styles? I could very much see some sort of stipulation being added that if AJ Styles were to win, Nick Aldis can no longer be the general manager. And I think that's the only way you can save, that story of Nick Aldis as the GM. You would have to just strip him of the title. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they don't even have the match. That's one of the things I like about having a podcast, is that we're free to have our own opinions and speculate wildly about what goes on in professional wrestling. But with that being said, very much looking forward to seeing the development on Friday Night SmackDown. It's the last SmackDown before Clash at the Castle. And until then, expect to see my predictions for Clash at the Castle this upcoming Friday. Another episode of the J Area Podcast coming up. Obviously, my name is Jose Ramos Jr. You can find me on all social media outlets, at JustJose_3. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe if you enjoy these podcast episodes. Please, any semblance of help in terms of the metrics, whether it's liking, sharing, or subscribing, does great wonders for content creators. And as we continue to strive for the 1,000 mark, we're getting closer and closer, guys. So I very much appreciate you guys. We will see you guys in the next episode of the J Area Podcast.